They, at that point, said, hey, we believe that, you have testicular cancer. We knew that we really weren't going to be able to have kids. Every day. I count the blessings that, they're out there digging in the same dirt that I dug in, playing in the same barns that I played in. I grew up with a family of 6 on a dairy farm. I'm the 3rd generation, and then my, children are 4th. So every morning between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, I wake up and I go, take care of our chores. I'm a school superintendent. I've been in school administration for about 13 years. I love the work. I love helping kids. I love the complexities of the school systems, but also, love the farm. So we have about 800 acres. We run beef cattle. It's a cow-calf operation. Being able to continue on the long legacy, and having 2 boys and knowing that hopefully it continues is pretty cool to stop and think about. But to be honest with you, life is busy, and I probably don't stop and reflect on that as much as I should. A non-work day, non-regular, school work day becomes a farm work day. The daily feeding, caring for the livestock, making sure everything is healthy, making sure everything has the nutrition that it needs, is where really I enjoy the most. The most rewarding is just simply the work. For the past 7 years, it's been being able to do it with my family. We love as a family to go on an evening cattle check, and so those are pretty special to us because we're all 4 there together. We're out checking the cattle and making sure everything's good. So I was 17 years old, and I was going through my senior year of football season. And the first thing I started noticing was not being able to sleep as well at night and having back pains. I didn't really think a whole lot of it, particularly being, in football season. I thought I was just, being sore, just being sore from that. 2 weeks after the season was over, I still having problems, but I started, I noticed a lump on my testicle, and continuing to have the back pains. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I had a doctor's appointment of a morning on a Friday, visited with them. They did an exam. They sent me directly over to the hospital that same day, in which I drank I guess it's the MRI liquid that highlights up, your body. And so I did a scan. Went back to my doctor, my PCP. I went back to my doctor probably middle afternoon. They, at that point, said, hey, we believe that, you have testicular cancer. They sent me over to a specialist that same day, over to a urologist specialist. They did a couple tests, I remember, and they said, hey, we think that you have cancer, testicular cancer, and we want to do surgery on you today. Throughout the scans, they found that my lymph nodes were enlarged, and that the cancer had spread from my testicle to my lymph nodes, and then had a little spot on my lungs. They told me at about that time, whenever we were going into surgery, they're like, I know you're just 18, but once we do this. You go through chemo, there's a chance that, your sperm cells don't redevelop and don't come back, even though, you're still going to have one testicle. Do you want to go this weekend and go bank some sperm? And I was like, how in the world am I going to have this surgery and, go and do what it takes to bank some sperm? So I opted not to do that. At that time, and just because everything was kind of lined up, and so then I started chemo that following Monday. I think it really kind of helped that I was 18 years old and thought I was bulletproof. But I can remember it being very, very tough on my parents. And, still to this day, I believe the whole process was much harder on them than it was me from a mental and emotional standpoint, because really for me, it was really a process-driven experience. Okay, what do I have to do? I have to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, and then ultimately, hopefully be okay. So I did end up having 4 rounds of chemotherapy, and what that looked like was 5 days a week, the post-chemotherapy lymph node dissection. And so that's where they get the non-nerve sparing. They had to take out part of those nerves where really they're like, okay, you're not going to be able to have kids naturally. They said they took out a mass about the size of your two fists put together. So I have a scar from about the bottom of my chest. It's about a 10-inch, scar. We knew that we really weren't going to be able to have kids, but we were on vacation. Brittany and I were sitting, in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and we said, "Do you think we ought to try this?" And so, it was a hard no until, really that conversation in which the idea got implanted that, hey, there's hope. There may be hope here. We were both 35 at the time, and we said, if we were going to have kids, we're going to try to have kids, we might want to just explore what options are out there. They sent me to a male fertility specialist. He said, okay, I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to stick it into your testicle, and I'm going to see if you've got any viable sperm in that testicle. So he said, what we're going to do is I want you to now go across the road to a female fertility specialist. And so we set up an appointment for Brittany over there. And so they kind of laid out the process of harvesting her eggs, and then where we would go from there. We limited the fertilization of the number of eggs. So we said we're going to fertilize 10 eggs. And then on the 5th day, we had lost 2 more, and so we were down to 3. For that same day, we did genetic, gender, and chromosome testing. So I can remember Brittany, she saw me at work, she started pulling out these baby outfits, and we not knowing if there's going to be a girl or boy or whatever, she pulls out a boy, and then she pulls out a girl, and then she pulls out another boy. Jay Henry went in, everything went great. He was the joy of our life for the 2 years where it was just him and mom and dad. So then we put, we started the next process. We decided we wanted to go boy, boy, girl, in the birth order. And so Jack got put in, and so then along came Jack. And then about 2.5 years later, we put in Anna-Kate. Anna-Kate, she made it for about 2 weeks, and then we lost her. So, yeah. And I'm sorry, I probably hadn't been emotional on that since the whole thing. But us being just, very blessed to have the 2 boys, and, they're just the light of our lives. We love them, and, they're our everything. I do every day. I think how blessed we are and how close it was that, it didn't happen.
Farmers don't give up.
I hope they see that the Christian influence that I try to be for them, and, hope that they recognize, what does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be a father? And they can reflect on their experiences with their dad. That's every farmer's dream, is that their kids come back and, carry it on. Why else would we be doing it? But, if they want nothing to do with it, then I'm not saying that it won't bother me, but, I just want it to be able to help them to do whatever they want to do.
I'm driving a tractor. I'm going to be a farmer someday.
I think it's important so that others who may be having some of the same struggles know that they're not alone. so that they can maintain hope. And hope is such an important word when it comes to cancer. It's such an important word when it comes to men being able to have children. And because without hope, then, things can really get overwhelming and feel pretty defeating.
Thank you so much for watching. If you were inspired by this story, we've queued up another one for you here. And please make sure you subscribe to the Patient Story community, where we're humanizing cancer one story at a time and always reminding people you're never alone.